Hey everybody, thanks for tuning into the Grow Wire podcast. I'm your host, Fritz Nelson. I'm joined by our producer, Kendall Fisher.
Hello.
Our guest this week is the inspiring best-selling author, Samantha Ettus. And it's no coincidence that we're doing this just a few days after the International Women's Day, because Sam is really the epitome of a woman empowering other women.
Yes.
Yep, and we chat all about that during this conversation. The journey she took to lead a life dedicated to helping women succeed, helping women create work-life balance. We all need a work-life balance. And she even wrote a book about it called The Pie Life, which we also dived into. And I'm wondering, Kendall, what's your favorite pie?
My favorite pie
Yeah.
would probably be, there's nothing better than I think a warm apple pie on Thanksgiving.
Warm
I don't
apple
eat
pie.
pie a lot though.
I like pie. For my birthday when I was a kid, I hated cake.
When's your birthday, by the way?
It comes during the year. Good try, though.
Wow.
But I didn't like cake, and so I always asked my mom to make a pie. And I think back then I liked cherry pie. But now my favorite pie is a peach cobbler. Yes.
Got it.
Yeah. But that's not what the pie life is about.
No, it is not.
Yes. Anyway, Sam discusses her own life, some of her big milestones, some of the lessons she's learned, and the places that she thinks she's still lacking. And she provides some insight for other entrepreneurs like herself and shares her opinion on what needs to change in the world for everyone, women and men, to truly succeed. So that's all coming up next.
Stay tuned. You're listening to the Grow Wire podcast, a place where you will learn the ins and outs of growing a business, running a business, or even taking your big idea, career, or personal development to the next level. It's all possible. Our host, Fritz Nelson, the editor-in-chief of GrowWire.com, will take you on an exploration of growth through candid conversations with some of the most brilliant minds in entrepreneurship, entertainment, business development, and more. Whatever your goal, we know you'll walk away with the right tools to help fuel your journey of growth.
Before we dive into this episode with Samantha Ettus, I want to thank our sponsors over at Hint. If you don't know about Hint yet, their brand is all about making everyday chores more enjoyable. It started when another inspiring woman, Kara Golden, needed a way to drink more water, but wanted flavor without the sugar and sweeteners that come in most drinks. I can relate to that. Water is good for you, but boring, I would say. So Kara agreed. She created Hint Water. Just has a hint of flavor from real fruit essences without any of those added sugars or sweeteners. My favorite flavor is the fettuccine flavor.
That's, Fritz, we've talked about this. That is not a flavor.
Are you sure?
I'm positive.
I feel like that should be a flavor.
Different strokes for different folks.
Well, I'm going to keep making my suggestions
Okay.
to the people at Hint.
I personally love the pineapple flavor, just if anybody was wondering.
Okay. Well, that seems kind of boring, but
It's
sure.
a real existing flavor.
Okay. If you say so. Well, everyone here at the Grow Wire office is a big fan of Hint Waters, but you should try them out for yourself. Go to hint.co/welcome to get 30% off your first purchase.
Bargain.
If you love listening to the Grow Wire podcast, I also want to make sure you head over to our website, growwire.com. The site is filled with entrepreneurial success stories, advice from business leaders, insights on how you can reach some of those big goals you've set forth. We even have our own show, the Grow Wire Show. In fact, this week we feature St. Hope, which is a nonprofit community development organization out of the Oak Park neighborhood of Sacramento. And Kendall, you were the one that did this, so tell us what St. Hope does.
Wow, this story really inspired. I mean, all of our stories inspire me, but this one just took it to another level. Basically, St. Hope wanted, Kevin Johnson, former mayor of Sacramento, NBA All-Star, wanted to go back to his community and help the kids where he grew up. And so he started a couple of schools. He opened a couple of schools, charter schools, but then realized from there that they kind of needed to do more. So what's interesting about St. Hope as a nonprofit is they're also an economic development kind of organization.
Meaning
so
what?
Basically they've started a couple of businesses, they've opened a couple of businesses, they've renovated different apartments, they have a barbershop, a theater, they have all this stuff that they're basically helping to employ people within the Oak Park community and also give to the children who are studying, at their schools. So for example, I interviewed one 18-year-old named Anaya, and she's a senior at Sacramento High School, and she works at their local library. And so it's not only helping, basically these kids get a better education, but it's also helping people get jobs and helping students land jobs. And it's just a really interesting story. They're really focused on getting their students into college, getting them through college, not just getting them into college, but seeing them through their college experience. The CEO is great. You guys will hear from him. Kevin Johnson talks to us too. Even though he's no longer, the CEO, he's still super involved. So it's a really great story, truly inspirational story about this neighborhood and how people came together to really make it better.
All right. Well, you can watch the series now on growwire.com. Hey, Sam, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
I want to start off with kind of maybe a weird question, but in this day and age, maybe it's not so weird anymore. What would you say is your occupation?
Helping women be financially independent.
But that wasn't always the case. Actually, I want to ask a follow-up to so when you fill out your tax form and they have that little place that says occupation,
yes.
What do you put there?
It really depends who the audience is. Often I will put, author. But lately I put entrepreneur because my primary focus is my company. So I have been, proving my model for the last few months, and we've already launched. And so now I really identify more as a businesswoman than as an author, or I used to be a radio host. I'm a very frequent public speaker. So I also, identify as that. But it's funny because speaking is not really a profession. It's almost an outcome of your expertise, I guess.
Okay, I got it. Now I'm going to ask you to do something, and this is an audio medium, but I'm going to ask you to do something.
Don't ask me to sing.
Visual. No.
Okay.
Oh, we could do that at the end. I'm going to ask you to do something, and then kind of I'll explain to listeners what we're doing, and then I want you to talk through it as you do it. It's a little written exercise. And what I have is a standard graph, and along the x-axis is time, and along the y-axis is success. And I want you to pick out 5 what you might consider milestones in your life, and I want you to plot them on this graph and then talk our listeners through it as you do it.
This is intense. I don't know if I was ready for this. I really needed to eat my Wheaties this morning.
So just
only
pick
5?
Only 5. Only 5.
And are they all professional milestones?
I did not give you any boundaries on that.
Okay. So I would say my first internship ever was at Viacom when I just graduated from high school. And when I was there, and this is kind of a funky professional milestone, but it did change me in certain ways. I was an HR intern. I was just happy to be in the door. I would have done anything. I was actually the person who was looking through secretarial resumes for typos, and I was told to throw out any resumes with typos. I thought it was the best job in the whole entire world. I was so thrilled. So I was there, the most eager beaver intern in the whole world. And this is going to really date me, but it was during the age of interoffice memos. Do you remember those big yellow envelopes? I'm sure,
and you had like a physical inbox on your desk?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I had no desk. I was kind of at the foot of the assistant's desk, the eager intern. And so one day I wrote an interoffice memo to Frank Biondi, who is the CEO of Viacom, asking him if he wanted to play tennis against me at the company picnic the following month, because I'd heard he was an excellent tennis player and I was going to college to play Division I tennis. And I thought, why not play? So about a week later, the secretary whose foot I used to sit at said, "This is very strange, Sam, but Mr. Biondi's office is on the phone for you." And I picked up and she said, "Mr. Biondi said he would love to play you at 1:00 at the company picnic." So I tell the assistant, and word spreads very quickly. And that day forward, the head of HR was basically attached to my hip because she wanted to make sure that she was with me the entire day of the company picnic. And we had a very big audience by the time we finished playing. It was probably about 500 people watching. And I beat him. I didn't understand that I might want to have played a customer's game. So it was, for him, he was not happy. I mean, he was, he lost to an 18-year-old girl intern in front of his company. And it was, anyway.
Nobody told you to lose?
Nobody told me to lose. My dad, when I got home that day, was a little bit surprised. But I think for me, I've always had that fearlessness about approaching people, and a big theme of my career has been cold calling or cold approaching. I guess there's no calling anymore. It's cold emailing or cold tweeting or,
cold direct messaging.
Cold contacting. So it's been a big theme of mine. So can that count as one of my milestones?
Sure.
Okay. Then I would say the second one is a sort of a similar thing. Graduated from college and moved out to Los Angeles without any job, and landed a job at Creative Artists Agency just through going to this staffing agency with a guy named Jules who placed me there, and it was a whole thing. That was a big milestone, getting my foot in the door, even though I had had no experience. And then the next milestone would probably be graduating from Harvard Business School and starting my own company.
You went from Los Angeles back to...
Yeah. Well, with a stint at San Francisco in between, I was in magazine publishing for a couple of years. And actually, that probably should be on my milestone list. See, limiting me to 5 is a big challenge, yeah. But I was selling computer advertising to Southern men, basically. I was a PC computing magazine account executive selling advertising to the Southeast and Texas.
Wow.
So for a couple of years. Then I went back and worked at Nickelodeon for 2 years on a show called Blue's Clues. And then I went to business school. And then when I graduated, I started a company focused on personality-driven brands, so personal branding firm. So starting that company was a big milestone for me.
Okay, so back to, so we have one, which was this moment in your internship where you realized what fearlessness would bring to you. Then moving to Los Angeles, and then back to Harvard.
Yeah, and it wasn't so much moving to Los Angeles as much as landing a job at this coveted talent agency, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah. And then graduating from business school and launching my own company for the first time, and sort of for the first time realizing it's not just about, my company, for example, was about personal branding. But if you have a dental practice, or if you have an ad agency, or if you have a shoe repair store, you are still dealing with the same difficult challenges that go into starting any business. And I think that was the biggest awakening for me when I started my first business was, oh my goodness, you have to deal with the legal aspects and the insurance and the staffing and hiring and all the stuff that you kind of forget about. You glamorize starting a business, and I think you forget about how much is actually the same for any business you start. You have to deal with those same barriers or challenges. Okay, so
we've got 3, I think, right?
Okay, so 3. Then publishing my first book was a big thing for me. It's called The Expert's Guide to 100 Things Everyone Should Know How to Do. It was published by Random House.
Can you do all 100 of those things?
Not very well. In fact, what I did was I was very overeducated academically, but undereducated in like the school of life. Like my mom never really taught me how to cook or how to do a lot of the basic things. And so I basically put a book together that was my own Cliff Notes to life. So it was a chapter on how to sew a button, on how to negotiate, on how to flirt, on how to, iron a shirt. In fact, I was on my book tour and I was in Dallas, and I get a call the night before from a producer, and she said, I just want to let you know that tomorrow our audience loves ironing in Dallas, and they want to know how to iron the perfect shirt. So we are going to have you demonstrate on air how to iron a shirt. Now you have to understand, I'd never ironed a shirt before in my entire life. So here I was memorizing the chapter the night before. It was like from Heloise, Helpful Hints from Heloise. I don't know if you remember her. And I thought, okay, I'll just talk my way through it. If I talk a lot, they won't really notice that I'm not an expert at ironing a shirt. So I get on set and I do my thing. I'm talking, and suddenly I see both anchors motioning to each other, kind of flipping out. And I look down and like the shirt is smoking. And the background crew is like howling. It's live television, and it's, Fox in Dallas, and I am burning a shirt on live TV as I try to demonstrate to the audience how to iron. But that was so that was a big milestone, publishing that book.
Man, I've burned so many shirts that way. Leave the iron on.
Really? And you keep going back for more?
I just stopped ironing the shirts.
Okay, yeah, that's what I would expect.
Just put a jacket on and nobody will know.
Or a steamer is my new trick. I'm a big fan of the steamer. I travel with a steamer, and it's a big thing, a handheld steamer.
Good to know.
Never have to iron again, yeah.
So now that's 4. I feel like such a taskmaster now.
Okay, yeah,
number 5.
You really are sticking to this. Number 5 is, definitely the first thing I put on here was having my kids, because it changed me so much. And I became a mom when I guess I was 34 when I first became a mom. My daughter Ella was born, and then I had 3 kids quickly. So I had 3 kids within 5 years. I felt like the baby years were so hard, I just wanted to plow through them. And I thought, let's just get this sleepless phase over with. And now it's really fun because they're all so close in age and they're really close friends, and it's dreamy that way.
Gotcha. Well, we're going to come back to that last one.
Yeah.
In a different way in a minute, but I wanted to go back through and touch on a couple things. So you mentioned tennis, and you were a high school tennis phenom and also played in college.
Yeah, so I played competitively since I was 9 years old, so from 9 and through college. So it was a big part of my identity growing up. I never really went to any parties. I was always playing tennis. I didn't have a normal childhood. So kind of the way you read about like a child actor or a child ice skater, that was very much my childhood.
And what would you say that you learned from those days of playing such a high level of competitive tennis that you still carry with you in the business world?
I think that especially I'm a big fan of sports for girls for this reason. I think it's such a good confidence booster to be proud of your body for something other than beauty, and be proud of it for what it can do and for its strength. And so that is a wonderful thing I got from it. And also just knowing how to win and understanding the psychology, because tennis is such a psychological game. It's not just about your talent at hitting a ball. It's not just about how many balls you hit. It's about understanding the psychology behind it. I think any individual sport is really good training for that, or you could say negative training, because it makes you really serious at a young age too in certain ways. And I think then also that it made me a little bit more resilient. I think the worst thing that can happen is I lose and then I get back up again. So I think that's a lot of what it taught me. And, when I went to college, I went to Harvard, and I was definitely, most of my friends were athletes too. And so, we'd always been used to balancing a lot. We were used to balancing our academics with our athletics and our friends and our families. And so that definitely impacted my time management throughout my whole life, I would say.
Now, you had kind of a career going, but decided to go back and get your MBA. Like, what drove you to want that path next?
Well, I was always kind of on the creative side, I would say. At the time I was working at Nickelodeon, and I was on a TV show called Blue's Clues, which was a preschool TV show basically for kids ages 2 to 6. And a lot of people who worked on the show were super passionate about children's television. They had grown up worshiping Mr. Rogers. I was not one of them. And I was a little bit of a fish out of water on that show. And I remember being in very long meetings on the creative side about whether this character should be a frog or a rabbit. And I just felt, okay, what's going on with our marketing? And I would ask a lot of questions and they'd say, no, that's the business stuff. Please just focus on the creative. And I thought, what if you had the skill set that incorporated both? What would that be like? And I really knew nothing about business. And so that was what drove me to go to business school. I would say that when I got there, I realized I was one of the only people that didn't already know everything. A lot of people in finance, consulting, hedge funds, private equity, they go to business school as a break from their rigorous job. So they'd already had all the finance. They'd already had the accounting. And when I first arrived at business school, I was so surprised that my skill set was not what was respected. I understood how to deal with people. I understood, inherently just, culture and marketing. And that was not what was most respected there when I went there, was the numbers. And that was something that I had to learn during business school because I really had no training in it. And I was surrounded by people who had already had finance and accounting in undergrad or in their previous jobs. So it's interesting.
And but then when you got done, you went back into, you went down the journalism path next. When I was finished with business school, I decided to create a company focused on personal branding. Okay, so that came after.
Yeah,
that. Okay.
There were so many CEOs that had come through HBS, and very few had a spark beyond their job title. And sometimes people think just because they're a CEO or they run a business that they have a lot to say that's going to be interesting for an audience. And 90% of the time, that's just not true. And I thought, what about the 10% who has that spark beyond their job title? How do they decide what speeches to do or what the topic of the speeches are? How do they think about their press opportunities, their board involvements? How do they write their bios? Everything having to do with a personal brand fascinated me. And when I looked into it, I realized that there was no one focused on personal branding. Now, it was 2001. Today, if you said to people, what's your personal brand? Pretty much anyone will say, I'm a little bit like Starbucks and a little bit like Southwest Airlines. I mean, everyone kind of has an idea of what a personal brand is, whereas then I was educating people on what a personal brand was and then saying, and this is why you need my firm. So.
Right. Well, and also in between, why do I need to have a personal brand?
Right. And now it's just much more of a thing. I think today it would be wildly popular, and then I was breaking a market, basically.
And so that was successful, but then
It was moderately successful.
Okay, moderately
I had,
successful.
6 employees.
Come on, personal branding here.
I had 6 employees. I had a number of clients that I loved, from a top Washington, D.C. lobbyist to a famous chef to, people in all different fields. I learned a ton and I loved my team. But when my first book took off, that book sold 200,000 copies, which in the book world is a lot of copies. And when it first took off, my clients, we did a lot of press, and they would call and be like, why aren't I on the Today Show? Why are you on the Today Show? And it became a whole thing. And then I got a call from Random House. My agent called and said, Random House wants to offer you a 3-book deal for the next 3 books in the series. And that was when I decided I'm just going to do the books full time and close my firm and place my employees in other places. And so that's what I did.
Was the idea of writing books, did that just appeal to you from an excitement standpoint or monetarily or a little of both?
I think those books I wasn't writing. I was really like the chief producer of those books, because what I was doing, and I thought it was the most fun job in the world, I had 100 experts in each book. I had everyone from Bobby Flay writing a chapter on how to barbecue, to Barbara Corcoran writing a chapter on how to sell a home, to Richard Branson on how to get a loan. I had such a wide variety of personalities, and they were all so interesting. And what I got to do is I was able to pick the top expert in every field and then approach them and say, you've been selected as the top expert in your field to write a chapter on XYZ. Now, they didn't need to know there was a 1-person selection committee. And I would play into their competitive spirit. If you don't write the chapter, I'm going to go to your top competitor and ask them to write the chapter. I didn't say it that overtly, but I certainly played upon the fact that they would be the one expert in their field in the book. And so I really didn't take no for an answer. When Barbara Corcoran said no 3 times, I went for a 4th, and then she said yes. So
a little perseverance learned and a little bit of playing them off each other.
And it was very fun. I tried to meet most of the experts who were in the book. So what ended up happening is after I think it was my third book, I met one of the experts. His name was Gary Vaynerchuk, and he's an internet entrepreneur now. But at the time, he ran a wine store, and he had a video show called Wine Library TV, and he was trying to become the Simon Fuller of the internet. And so he chose me as his second personality and developed a web talk show around me. So I hosted an internet talk show that was kind of like a Barbara Walters for the web that he produced called Obsessed TV. And I interviewed 75 different personalities for the show. And that was during the Expert's Guide time, that era.
So you were writing and doing
hosting the show, yeah.
So that was a lot.
And making babies, yeah. I was doing all of it.
So the babies came during that time too. Wow.
The babies were during that time, the 3 books and the show, yeah.
Gotcha. Did you enjoy doing that show?
I loved it. It was a lot of fun. But when I first started the show, Gary Vaynerchuk wanted to be a manager. And so we had a deal where he was my manager. I think it was the only person he ever managed, because then he became his own, personality. So when we first started, he had 30,000 Twitter followers. When we ended, he had 1 million. And I think it became clear that the only brand he would be managing in the future would be his own. And so eventually it just, wasn't sustainable, the show.
So
I learned a lot.
All of that stopped at some point.
Yeah, I published my 4th book. I was very much missed working with personalities, especially with women. And after having kids, I realized that, you could, and even with my firm, you could only take a person so far without touching their personal life. If they were having marital problems or financial issues or health issues or problems parenting, it definitely bled into their professional achievements and their professional path. And so there was always kind of this elephant in the room with whoever I was working with of what obstacles they were facing personally. And I'd worked with so many experts. After my experts guides were done, I had 400 experts I'd worked with, on top of all the people I'd interviewed over the years. And I realized that there was no expert on work-life balance who was just focused on how to manage your professional and personal life. So I set out to become one, and I really self-educated and did a ton of research and working with thousands of women and figuring out what the most successful women had in common. And I put that into my last book, The Pie Life.
The Pie Life. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back and talk about The Pie Life. Samantha Ettus isn't the only one with a story to tell. In fact, everyone has a story to tell. And if you're a storyteller, you probably know Blue Mics for their iconic Yeti microphone, which has helped millions of people find and amplify their voices. If you're thinking about creating your own podcast, recording some voiceovers, or maybe even practicing your audiobook reading skills, then you need to check out Blue's new Yeticaster, the complete mic and boom arm system ready to connect to your laptop, bringing the ultimate broadcast studio setup to your home or office. Today I was doing something with a mic, Kendall. I don't know if you noticed or not, but I was listening to other speakers and I was scratching my beard. I have a beard now with a... and so I'm scratching it with the mic. I don't know why. It just felt good.
Yeah.
I wonder if Blue Microphones has tested that scenario.
Tested beard itching.
Yeah, beard
with their
itching.
mic. I'm sure they have. I'm
sure that the little beard hairs get stuck in there.
I'm sure that's part of their design quality.
Yeah.
Is beard scratching.
I wonder which mics feel best on the beard.
That's why we have hanging mics, so that you actually can't do that and rub your particles.
Yeah, I want to do it. I'm looking at the mic and I can't reach it with my beard. And literally, that's what we use here at the Grow Wire Santa Monica studios, and we really do enjoy recording with them, even when we can't reach them with our beard. So I should say my beard. To get your hands on one of these setups, visit bluedesigns.com and use the code podcast at checkout for a special price. Ooh. The Pie Life is, you talk in the beginning of the book about balancing work and life. You also talk about juggling. And the pie life is kind of, figuring out how, not necessarily the juggling part, but how to find that balance. Before we get into some of the details of the pie life, how would you describe this dichotomy of work-life balance, the problem we all seem to have?
I see it as an opportunity. I think that until the pie, I guess I would say, there were so many unhealthy, negative frameworks for how to think about work and life. And we talk about having it all, but then if you ask people if they know anyone who has it all, they can't think of anyone. So why are we trying to achieve it? It doesn't really make sense. Then we talk about work-life balance, and for a scale to be in perfect balance, you'd have to spend equal time at work and at home. And if you have a thriving career, you're never really doing that, so you're set up to fail. And then we talk about juggling. And anyone who's ever had a conference call with a baby in the room knows that's just not possible. So we really don't have any positive framework for how to think about it. I don't know if you remember Anne Marie Slaughter's Atlantic Monthly cover that said women can have it all. And it was really became a huge thing in the media. And it made me so upset because I think that cover was responsible for so many women leaving the workforce. It was kind of validating, oh, see, I can't have it all, forget about it. And what she had just done was the equivalent of a tour of duty in Iraq. She'd spent 2 years working for the State Department, leaving her family for 5 nights a week for 2 years, which 99.999% of us would never do and are not doing. And so men, I always thought, would never have someone come back from a tour of duty in Iraq and allow them to be their spokesperson. But women did. So I felt compelled to offer this positive framework. And there's a bunch of financial statistics that are quite scary. If you're a woman who leaves the workforce for just 1 or 2 years, there's less than a 50% chance you will ever get a full-time position again for the rest of your life. So it's financial suicide to leave the workforce if you think about what it could do for the future of your family and your own financial well-being. It's very, very risky. So I felt really strongly that we needed to help women manage the life that they did have, assuming it's going to include a career and all these other things. And what I found is that the most fulfilled women were those that were involved in 6 or 7 areas of their life. They were involved with their family, with their health, with their career, with their friends, their hobbies, with their community. Did I skip any? I think that was it, all 7.
I wasn't counting.
And well, that's okay. Oh, and I didn't mention the relationship or their quest to find one. But that's those 7 slices, being involved in all 7 of their slices was really important. And what I found is that the most successful women, whether, for my book, I interviewed people like, at the time, the president of Barnard College, and Sally Krawcheck, the most senior woman on Wall Street, and Stacey Bendet, who started Alice and Olivia, the clothing company, women who were at the top of every field I could think of. And the one thing they had in common, they spent almost no time feeling guilty, and they spent time in each of those slices. Now, it doesn't mean they're spending equal time in each of those slices. It just means that they exist in some way. Even if it's like a sliver of their pie, it exists. So the framework I put together was the idea that you look at your 7 slices and you see how much time you're spending in each one. And instead of beating yourself up based on that time, you think, okay, I'm probably rational about how much time I'm spending in each. I probably couldn't spend any less time at work and still be successful, or any less time with my kids or with my relationship. But you make a goal for each of those slices. So once you set a specific goal to it, it starts existing. So even if you didn't have a hobby before, if you say my goal is to spend, 2 hours a month playing the guitar, you're going to figure it out and make it happen.
Right. And you talk in the book about setting very specific goals versus broad goals. And we all have goals, but I think what you say is that if the goals are too broad, then we kind of never get around to them.
Exactly. It's kind of like how we all say, okay, I'm going to work out 5 days a week, even though last year we didn't work out at all. And then by February, you've given up on that goal because it's just too lofty. But if you said, I'm going to go for a walk 3 days a week for a half hour at a time, you can probably stick with that. Or, a lot of people say, I'm gonna get into a relationship next year with no plan at all. And that person's probably not landing on your windshield on the way to work, right? But if you say, I'm going to go on one date a week, or I'm going to put up a new online dating profile, that's going to get you there.
Right. So it's having goals, but being very specific about them. If you just say, well, I'm going to work out more, well, then you probably won't, because it's not specific enough.
Exactly.
Why a pie?
Because, our time is 100%. So if you think of it as a full pie, you start out every day and every week and every year with a full circle. And it's just a matter of how you divide it. And as women, we tend to often think, okay, if I am just focused on being the best mom and wife I can be, I'll be perfect at it. Or if I just focus on my career right now and my health and working out, then I'm going to have the body I want and the job I want. That's not how life works. In fact, what I found is that women who leave their jobs thinking that they'll never miss a moment, they'll end up missing their child's first steps because they're at their older son's soccer game. I mean, when things go wrong, we tend to blame work. And it's often just that life is messy. And no matter what you do, it's going to be messy. And I think that once you adapt that mentality of realizing that every day is a series of messy moments, and some are great and you might get the best news in a phone call, and then a second later your boss comes in and is furious with you. It's just how life is. It's not because it's your luck or your day. It's how all of life is. And it's part of my parenting philosophy too. I've really tried hard to say, this is a moment. It's going to pass. Because what we tend to do is we'll label things. Oh, it's just a really bad day, and it's only 11 a.m. So you're kind of guaranteeing that the rest of the day is going to be pretty much garbage too.
You, speaking of messy, I think you say that your favorite pie is a Boston cream. Am I remembering that right?
You know what? You failed that quiz. No,
Oh.
It's chocolate cream.
Chocolate cream.
I'm not really
Close.
a pie lover, and
Okay.
the irony of this, and I probably really like pizza pie the best, but the irony of this entire thing is that when I went on book tour, I can't tell you how many people bought pies for my appearance, and I'd be there with another apple pie,
Oh, boy.
and I never want to eat another apple pie again, but yes.
Does your husband, Mitch, follow the tenets of the pie life?
I would say very much, yeah. We have a very strong division of labor at home, and I think it's one of the pivotal things for anyone to have a thriving career. You either need to be single or you need to be with a partner who supports your career 100% and is really a believer in your career. It's impossible to be as successful as you can be or to reach your personal potential if you're doing 90% of the work at home. And unfortunately, a lot of people I work with and a lot of letters I get, a lot of emails, calls are from people who are in relationships that are just not supportive. And of course you're angry. Of course you're tired because you're not getting the support you need at home. I remember I once on my radio show had a woman call in. I used to host a call-in radio show, and a woman called in and said, I just need to talk to you. I'm tired all the time. And I said, well, tell me a little bit about your life. And she said, well, I love my job. I am the general manager of an auto rental place. And she's like, and I love it. And I get to work every day at 7:30 in the morning. And then when I come home at 5 o'clock, I have 7 children and we all cook dinner together. And my husband works part-time. And every night he expects me to have sex with him. And I said, well, what happens when you get home? What is he doing? Because you mentioned the kids are helping with dinner. And she goes, he's sitting on the couch playing video games. And I said, okay, well, I think we just found the problem. What would happen if you suggested that he help out? And she goes, oh, he would never help. And I said, okay, you said your oldest daughter is 18 years old. What happens if in 10 years she brings home someone just like your husband who sits on the couch playing video games? And she goes, oh my gosh, I would die if that happens. And I said, well, it's very likely going to happen because that's what you're modeling. And she's like, I'm going to talk to him tonight. I'm not going to let this happen anymore. And I think sometimes as women, especially, we can be complete martyrs and think that, we're suffering for a reason. But at the end of the day, no one wins when you feel guilty. No one wins when you don't speak your opinion or use your voice. And it's impossible for, often people in relationships think their partner is a mind reader. So a lot of the time, it's just a matter of vocalizing what your needs are. And so often, women will do the bulk of the work expecting that one day their partner's going to know they're doing the bulk of the work and just come home and be 50%, as opposed to saying, you know what, I feel like I'd have more time for us, or more time for the things in our life if we split everything a little more evenly. If you've partnered with someone who's rational, they're going to be happy to reconfigure the division of labor. But often women aren't using their voices to express that.
Sure. I can't remember where I heard this, but like men will have the tendency to like announce to the world, I cleaned the bathroom, like, like it was a major accomplishment or whatever. But you spend a lot of time in this book with this sort of partnership advice. And it made me think of a piece I read a long time ago called Helping versus Sharing. And, in a lot of, especially traditional, I don't know if it happens as much today. I remember reading this piece maybe when I was 18 or 19 years old. It's a long, long time ago. And the idea of the piece was a man will often say, well, let me help. Let me, I will make a meal, or I will go food shopping or whatever. But sharing is sitting down and planning that week's meal, those week's meals together. And it's maybe a more emotionally draining exercise. What are we going to do? Versus, well, I'll go, just give me a list and I'll go to the store and get it.
Right.
Sure, that's helpful, but it's not really sharing. And it struck me as I read or listened to a lot of this book that a lot of the advice is encouraging women to basically invite men to share, not just help, or in the case of this woman that you talked about, not help at all.
Absolutely. I think it's really critical that we also realize who's watching, right? So it's just like I often give speeches at companies, and a boss will say, what can I do to help work-life balance in my company? And I say, do you take all your vacation days? Do you leave the office at a healthy hour? Because if your boss isn't modeling it, your employees then are not comfortable doing those things that lead to healthy work-life boundaries. Similarly, at home, there are little people watching you. And there's a reason that daughters of working moms earn 23% more as adults than daughters of stay-at-home moms. Sons of working moms end up helping out in the home a lot more when they're adults. So it really is important what we're modeling. People are watching. So the whole idea of you can't, be it if you can't see it, it starts at home. And so you want to be modeling an egalitarian relationship if you want your kids to grow up and have those too.
I don't want to give away all of the book. I want to encourage people to go read it or listen to it. The one thing that really strikes me when I listen to the Pie Life is, because I do it on audiobook, is how much like practical advice you give. So it would just encourage people, they're like, you almost go through a litany of things that people can do for every single slice. How to come up with goals that are very specific, how to start these conversations that bring a partnership to a point where there is balance. But I want to end talking about the Pie Life by asking you, what slice would you say maybe you haven't paid enough attention to for yourself?
The health slice, for sure. Everyone always says, how do you do it all? You have 3 kids, you are married, you have, a full career. How do you do it? And you have friends and you're social. And I don't work out. That's my dirty little secret, is right now I don't work out. I can't even conceive of when to work out every day. I go for like a hike once a week, but I really intend to go 3 times a week. And that's my goal, because I know I'd be healthier if I did. And so, so much of health is just about your energy and about keeping active. And so that is one of my personal New Year's goals, is doing that more. But that's definitely the slice that, I'll make everyone's doctor appointment in my family, but then forget my own. And that's very typical, but that's not a good thing.
Okay. We're going to hold you to that.
Which American company started with a guy in a garage, was featured on Shark Tank, and now has over 1 million customers? Hint, they're reducing crime in neighborhoods everywhere. Here's Ring Video Doorbell founder Jamie Siminoff with his secret to success.
It's true. In just a few years, we've had huge growth. We've hired hundreds of people, expanded our warehouse, and we're shipping millions of units a year, all while making sure our customers are happy. I've had lots of things to worry about, but I never worry about our finance and accounting because we use NetSuite from Oracle. From the beginning, NetSuite let me see what's going on with my business in real time, from revenues to expenses, customers and orders, even HR. I run my business from a dashboard right on my phone. NetSuite has been my business management system from 10 to a team of over 1,000, and NetSuite will be my choice as we continue to innovate and grow.
Go to netsuite.com/ring to see how Jamie scaled his business. You'll also get our free guide titled Overcoming Your 5 Obstacles to Growth. That's netsuite.com/ring for your free guide and the story of a great American company. netsuite.com/ring.
I want to switch topics to talk about, a hot topic over the last couple of years, which is women in the workplace, women in business, and you do a lot of public speaking, and you obviously speak to a lot of career women who are obviously at different levels of success. Would you say in the past 2 years, how would you characterize the progress that women have made in the workplace, in business?
Slow. I think it's disappointing. If you look at the numbers, they're not good. They're fine. They're slow. They're hundreds of years until we achieve parity. Are you talking parity? In terms of pay, in terms of representation in the workforce. But I think we spend a lot of time talking about the wage gap, and we don't spend enough time talking about the ambition gap. And it starts very early on. My daughter was the only child when she was 8 years old on her Lego robotics team that was a girl. Now, being the only girl at 8 years old on a Lego robotics team, that's where we need to focus. You can complain about the fact there's a lack of female engineers now, but why are we enrolling all the girls in ballet and all the boys in Lego robotics? You have to think about the next generation and what we're showing them and what we're teaching them. I overheard a heartbreaking conversation between my daughter and son the other day. My daughter had this book of questions, and she opened up and she said, "Do you think it's better to be a girl, or it's easier to be a girl or a boy?" And she immediately said, "Boys have more job opportunities." And she's only 11. And I said, "Why do you feel that way?" And she certainly has a strong mom role model, right, in the workforce. But she said, "Because there's never been a woman who's been president." And that, she's growing up thinking that. And it just killed me and broke my heart. She happens to be a very strong kid, has, her own very specific goals of what she wants to be and what she wants to do. But the fact that she's growing up feeling this way just is so sad. And I think that we don't encourage our girls as kids in the same way that we encourage our boys. So I think it starts really early on. And I also think that one of the reasons I'm so passionate about helping women achieve financial independence is because if you don't have any earning power, you have no power. It's very hard to have power in your relationship if you don't earn money. I see women every day who get into really difficult situations. Something unexpected happens, whether it's a divorce or a death or illness or someone losing their job. And if you haven't worked in 10 years, you put yourself in a really vulnerable position. But the other thing about it is that when one woman leaves the workforce, she also leaves all the other women in her company behind that she might have pulled up with her or might have mentored or might have been a role model to. In my book, I talk about this woman I became obsessed with named Edna Hendershot. There was an amazing article called An Unbelievable Story of Rape in ProPublica, which is one of the best periodicals. I love it. But it was an incredibly well-researched, very long article. And it was all about this one woman who made it her mission to figure out who this serial rapist was. And she had 2 kids. And I always said, and nobody knows her name, right? I mean, I'm the only person who's probably this passionate about her that doesn't, not her in her immediate family. However, if you look at what Edna Hendershot did, if she had decided, I'm just going to stay home and share my gifts with my own children, she would have really deprived the world of her gifts. And I think that everyone is born with gifts, and part of them can be nurturing a family, but there's other parts of it, and we all have parts of ourselves that we need to access. And I think it's really wonderful to reach your potential in every possible way as a human, whether you're a graphic designer, whether you like to run things, whether you are an organized person, whatever it is, everyone has some skill that they can contribute to the world. And so we just have to figure out how to create a world where there is childcare that's affordable, where there are ways that everyone can contribute to the workforce without feeling like they have to make a choice.
So what do you think the things are that will get us there?
Certainly different parental leave policies, definitely just a no tolerance culture at companies for harassment. There's almost no woman that I work with that doesn't experience something on a day-to-day basis at work that makes her uncomfortable, that she's just learned to live with. And so when you have more women in leadership, it prevents a lot of the cultural things that force women to leave. Women don't always leave the workforce because they wanted to be home with their kids. They often leave because they're in an intolerable environment, or they're not getting paid as much as their colleagues, or their partner wasn't being supportive at home and it made it impossible for them to have a thriving career. There are a lot of things that we all contribute to that could make it easier. But in terms of government policies, certainly affordable childcare, preschool for all, and parental leave policies like other first world countries would definitely make it easier.
You describe your father as a Renaissance man. What does that mean?
My dad was the one in our house who cooked dinner every night. He was the one who sewed the buttons, who ironed the shirts. I mean, still, if I go home to New York and I have a speaking engagement, he will wake up early in the morning because he wants to iron my outfit for me. That's always...
He doesn't burn the shirts.
He doesn't burn the shirts. That's why I never learned. I was spoiled. So he always did everything and was always an equal partner. So it never, ever occurred to me to grow up and not have a partner who was doing half the stuff. I mean, it would never have entered my, people say you're so lucky. And I think to myself, I'm not lucky. I chose this person and I trained him, right? I mean, I always think like if he'd married his ex-girlfriend, he probably wouldn't be a 50-50 partner. But I had very high expectations. And I've always been that way. And I think that so often it comes down to our expectations of how people treat us and what we'll tolerate. And it's not like I won the lottery. It's that I chose someone that I knew I could partner with who also would be amenable to a partnership. And I think it's really critical in your choice. You're not just looking for tall, dark, and handsome. You're looking for someone who's going to make a good life partner in that way.
Right. And you both need that in order for you to be successful in things not, in the workplace, for example. Absolutely.
I think it's so important. Your choice of partner is one of the most pivotal choices that you'll ever make in terms of your future happiness. And it's something that we don't talk about enough.
So switching back to your business side, you started a company, Park Place Payments. So this has, like, when I look at your career trajectory and turns and curves in the road, I don't see this one.
Okay, well, I'll tell you why you should have. It's not a pivot. It's actually on my path, and here's why. When I've built a pretty robust speaking career at this point. I've spoken at hundreds of companies. There was always a group of women who would say, yeah, but I don't work at a company, or I want to get back to work, and how do you help me? And I was unable to help those women with anything but inspiration, knowing that the road back for them would be almost impossible. And I just ended up having so many women come to me with financial issues. There was a wonderful book that came out maybe 10 years ago now called The Feminine Mistake. And it was an economic argument for why all women should work, because more than 50% of women will find themselves in financially vulnerable positions that they didn't anticipate. And that book sort of laid out that unless you have a trust fund, you need to work. Because a lot of people say, oh, I'm lucky enough I don't have to work, or I'm lucky enough that, my husband makes a lot of money. If that stopped next year, would you still be okay? And the answer for most people is no. And the workforce, unfortunately, is super unfriendly to women who've left and want to return. So there was this group of women that I could only offer inspiration to, but never could offer anything more. At the same time, I noticed so many women that were very well educated, that I respected, starting to sell makeup and skincare and jewelry to their friends. And there's so many companies, like the modern day Avon lady, although Avon also still exists. There's 6 million Avon reps. still wildly popular and profitable. And I thought, why are these women all selling makeup and skincare and none of them are selling financial services? And I've had a front row seat for the last 12 to 15 years to the payments industry and noticed that it's all male. So right now there's 30,000 men who in this country who sell payment processing. And basically payment processing is any business, whether it's a doctor's office or a restaurant or a hair salon that takes credit cards, has to go through a middleman between them and MasterCard, Visa, and Amex. And today the middleman is all men. And so I created the first ever women-dominated sales force in the industry. And it's the same labor force that was selling jewelry and makeup to their friends instead is selling to their local businesses, whether it's their own pediatrician or their salon or their toy store or any business in their area that they frequent. And so I've spent the last 6 months testing the model, proving it. And these women are doing phenomenally well. I trained women in 6 states, and we're about to launch Park Place Academy, which enables me to train women anywhere in the country to be part of our team.
So it's an all-female employee.
And it's not all female, it's female driven. So if a man applies, he is welcome to join our team, but it's mostly female. Yes.
Gotcha. So now we will call them like middle women instead of middle men?
You can do that. I like that. I haven't heard that before. Right. But the idea is it's all recurring revenue, credit card processing. So the idea is that why are we saying to women, you're only good enough to sell makeup and skincare and beauty and wellness, but you can have a piece of this other pie, which is financial services. These women are overqualified, are overeducated, and they're killing it in the workplace, and they're making real money. And, my passion for women's financial independence it's like this is people say this is so unsexy. You've been on the Today Show and Good Morning America and all these places, and I say this is the sexiest thing I've ever done, because if I can help women gain financial independence, I mean that's kind of the fantasy for me.
Okay, I like that. So let's go with that. Got a final series of questions to ask you. First of all, well, here's a non-serious one, but can your daughter still recite your wedding toast?
She can't, but she has certainly seen my wedding video for, way too many times.
Gotcha. One question that, as we kind of traced your career path from the beginnings to now, Park Place Payments, how would you define growth today?
I mean, I'm a very curious person, so I always want to be learning. So if I come home from a day and I have learned, I feel like I've grown. And for me, I'm learning every day, right? I'm learning from the little people that I share my home with and my life with, and I'm learning at work every day because I'm in this field that's growing, and payments industry is constantly changing, and the environment for women is constantly changing. So I happen to be in an environment where I am stimulated all the time.
And on the flip side of that, as you look back over your career, a lot of times growth comes from pain. It comes from failure. Or learnings from failure, right? So what would you call maybe your biggest failures that you learned from and grew from?
I mean, I've certainly had relationship failures. I have a divorce in my 20s, a broken engagement, you name it. So I have plenty of personal failures. And professionally, I think that my second book wasn't as successful as it could have been. My second expert's guide, I have this philosophy that you shouldn't live life in the past lane. I almost have amnesia for failures. I know that sounds weird, but I don't think much about them. I just keep moving forward, perhaps to an extreme, but I really just don't look backwards. And in fact, it came back to haunt me the other day. My older daughter, who's 12, she listens closely, carefully, and clearly. And she said to me, I said, Ella, you know how yesterday, and she goes, Mom, I thought you said not to live life in the past lane. Why are you talking about yesterday? And I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to come back to bite me. Like everything I say to her is coming back to me like that. But
they store these things like weapons to use against you.
Yeah.
So looking towards the future, I want to revisit this piece of paper that we started with on the timeline. If we go out in the future and we say, what will your success milestones be? What would you predict for yourself?
Well, in the next year and a half, I would say I want to have at least 1,200 women account executives working for Park Place Payments, and launch women to financial independence through Park Place. So that's a huge goal for me. I make very specific goals with each of my account executives. We're now still small enough that I can do that with 50 account executives. But we'll say, where do you want to be in February? Where do you want to be in April? By the end of next year, I want to have our first annual conference, women's conference for Park Place. And I really want to get our sales force into the 4-digit numbers. So I have big goals, and I need to build this rocket ship fast.
Great. Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining us. I certainly learned a lot from your book and also from talking with you today.
Thank you so much.
I want to reiterate Samantha's final point there. Everyone has a gift. How are you contributing yours to the world? Thank you so much to Samantha Ettus for joining us on this episode of the Grow Wire podcast. I also want to shout out to everyone who made it possible. Our sponsors over at Hint, Blue Mics, and Ring, as well as our editing crew over at Lampstand, and you, our producer, Kendall Fisher.
That is so nice of you. Thank you.
Well, we can't wait to do this again soon.
Indeed. Bye-bye. You just listened to the Grow Wire podcast with host Fritz Nelson. Make sure to keep tuning in for more episodes full of tips, tools, stories, and strategies to help take your personal and professional growth to the next level. Until next time.